The hum of the celestial Concorde's core reverberated through the hull like a mechanical purr. Kalen adjusted the collar of his dress uniform for the 17th time in as many minutes, sweating lightly under the weight of being somewhere he absolutely didn't belong. The diplomatic summit had already begun an hour ago, and he was still trying to figure out whether the glowing yellow orb on the table was a centerpiece, a dessert, or a life form silently judging his fashion choices. His name tag blinked. It read Liaison Kalen Drev, Terran Cultural Attaché. That was a stretch. The closest he'd ever come to Terran culture was once explaining to a confused Martian envoy the significance of socks with sandals. And yet, due to what the ship's AI had calmly referred to as an alphabetical compression error, Kalen had been assigned a seat at the high envoy table, right beside her. He hadn't known it would be her until she walked in. Velara, Zyerlian diplomat, galactic icon, allegedly once ended a war just by arching an eyebrow, rumored to have a smile that could cause temporary paralysis in weak-hearted species. Also rumored to have vaporized a suitor by accident during a mispronounced marriage proposal, though that might have just been a problem with his universal translator. She was tall, graceful, and distinctly unhuman, but only subtly so. Her skin shimmered faintly like nebulae in stasis. Her long ears swept back elegantly, half concealed beneath cascading hair that didn't quite obey gravity. She moved like a language no one had translated yet. And now, impossibly, she was lowering herself into the seat beside Kalen with the kind of composure that made even the surrounding star systems blush. He turned his head casually, almost dislocating his neck in the process. "Hi," he said, his voice cracked somewhere between startled squirrel and broken intercom. She nodded in acknowledgement, silence stretched. Diplomats around the room were engaging in soft but intense conversation. Some spoke in clicks, others in melodic pulses. The warlord from Harkin 8 was already 2 drinks in and singing about fungus rights. Kalen cleared his throat. "You're really beautiful." He didn't mean to say it. It just slipped out, raw and clumsy and completely against the 22 protocols outlined in the Interstellar Summit Etiquette Manual, Volume II. Things you definitely shouldn't say near royalty. Velara turned to him slowly, her violet eyes luminous and unreadable. There was a pause so long, he began to wonder if time had paused just to watch him implode. And then she smiled. It wasn't polite or performative. It was warm, slightly amused, just a flicker of mirth like she'd heard something unexpected and charming and had decided not to press charges. Around them, the room stilled. Subtle movement ceased. At least 3 robotic stewards short-circuited in confusion. The ship's AI dimmed the lights by 12% and cued a soft saxophone track, then corrected itself with a startled override. "Ignore." "I'm sorry," Kalen mumbled. "That just kind of escaped me. I was going to compliment the fruit carving and then your face happened." Velara's smile deepened. Terrans are refreshingly unscripted, usually by accident. He reached for his drink to escape the moment and promptly inhaled it instead. The brandy was not forgiving. It burned like solar fire and memories of middle school dance rejections. "You're not used to fermented slime fruit, I assume," she said, delicately sipping hers as though it didn't taste like engine coolant filtered through anxiety. "Let's say I was expecting water and got betrayal." A soft chuckle escaped her lips. A nearby diplomat from the Geltic Combine dropped his monocle. Kalen didn't know how it was possible to wear a monocle with 6 eyes, but he somehow did it with dignity, until now. Across the table, Ambassador Verrill of the Kren consulate leaned toward his assistant and whispered something while glancing at Kalen. The assistant nodded gravely. Somewhere above them, a drone hovered closer, its lens blinking red with curiosity. "You've disrupted the room," Velara said, tone neutral but clearly entertained. "I'm really good at that. Just last week I caused a 30-minute lockdown by sneezing near a hyperspectral fruit bowl. Turns out they were eggs." "Were they valuable?" "Very. One of them hatched during the incident and now follows me around the diplomatic wing. I named him Gerald. The smile returned, softer this time. She looked at him, not around him, not past him, but at him, and he felt like a mystery worth unfolding rather than a diplomatic typo in a borrowed uniform. I was told Xyrelians rarely smile in public, he said. You were told correctly. Smiling is considered a strategic act among my kind. It implies emotional vulnerability, weakness. So, I guess I just caused a minor diplomatic incident with a compliment. No, you caused interest. That's rarer. They paused as a server approached. The tray held what looked like metallic spheres dusted with stardust. The server bowed and murmured, "Essence of collapsed sunberry, please avoid direct inhalation." Kalen blinked. "I have so many questions." "Don't ask them," Velara advised, already reaching for a fork with the confidence of someone who hadn't recently Googled how to use alien utensils without dying. Kalen copied her movements, misjudged the fork's balance, and catapulted the sunberry across the table. It bounced off a gelatinous diplomat with a wet splitch before being absorbed with a polite gurgle. "I'm going to be executed, aren't I?" Velara tilted her head, "Possibly, but not tonight." "Great, I'll pencil it in." The meal continued, the summit carried on. Treaties were discussed, sectors divided, alliances shaped with words like mutual security and resource interdependence. Kalen understood maybe 12% of it, but he understood the glance Velara gave him between negotiations. He understood the way she leaned slightly closer when he spoke. He understood that sometimes the most delicate shifts in history didn't start with declarations or invasions, but with a smile across a table neither person was meant to share. At the end of the evening, when the guests began to disperse, and the ship's gravity adjusted slightly for optimal digestion, a feature that caused several delegates to hiccup in perfect sync, Kalen rose from his seat. He turned to Velara and hesitated. "It was incredibly not boring sitting next to you." "High praise," she said, rising as well. "Next time perhaps you'll tell me more about Gerald. You haven't heard his song yet." "I look forward to it." As she walked away, her long ears catching starlight like silver arcs, the room seemed slightly quieter. Kalen stood there a moment longer before whispering to himself, "I am absolutely, definitely, monumentally screwed." The ship's AI responded with a low chime, emotional turbulence detected, logging entry for potential poetry. "Shut up." Logged. Kalen entered the diplomatic lounge the next morning convinced that his badge would no longer open any doors, and perhaps might instead trigger some sort of silent alarm, followed by a gentle escort to the nearest airlock. Instead, it chirped pleasantly, the door slid open with a hiss, and an automated voice welcomed him by name and wished him an emotionally coherent morning. Inside, the space buzzed with the polite static of interspecies conversation. A Vextral ambassador was arguing about mineral tariffs with a being shaped like a mobile jellyfish chandelier. Somewhere near the center, a Terran delegate was attempting to negotiate coffee rations using interpretive dance, which Kalen assumed was either a new strategy or a slow, caffeinated breakdown. And there she was. Velara stood beside a circular holomap, surrounded by glowing projections of trade routes, star corridors, and something labeled Zone of Mildly Shared Custody, which Kalen guessed was a diplomatic term for places where everyone was equally confused. She spoke in calm tones, gesturing with the kind of precision that made even the lasers in the map seem shy. The others listened, really listened. Kalen approached carefully, hoping to remain a background blur until he could sneak to the buffet table. Instead, she turned before he said a word. "You survived the night," she said. "Only just. I tripped on my robe and almost declared war on a coat rack. The coat rack declined. You show admirable restraint. Many would retaliate. I considered it, but diplomacy." She stepped away from the projection, signaling to her aides with a graceful flick of the hand. Then she looked at him with that same amused glint he had no defense against. "Would you join me for a rotation?" I don't know what that is, but yes. She led him into one of the ship's auxiliary corridors, less ornate, less patrolled, and according to the signs, recalibrated hourly for mood lighting and emotional flow. The corridor adjusted itself the moment they stepped in. The walls shimmered from metallic bronze to soft ocean green. The lights warmed to the color of a late afternoon nap. I think the corridor is trying to seduce us, Kalen whispered. It's meant to optimize diplomatic rapport. Some delegates prefer to argue under calming hues. My landlord once painted our entire building calming beige. It mostly optimized mildew. They walked slowly. She moved like someone used to people adjusting their pace to hers. Kalen tried not to bounce when he walked. I reviewed your personnel file, she said. Oh, so, that explains why the cafeteria server now calls me ambassador-to-be. You are not what I expected. Me neither. I mean, I didn't expect me either. I was actually supposed to be on leave this week, visiting my cousin on Ceres. She raises genetically confused poultry. It's a long story involving a teleportation mishap and too much caffeine. Velara tilted her head. You deflect with humor. Is it working? Debatable, but endearing. They stopped at a viewing panel. Stars drifted past in slow parallax. A distant planet rotated silently, wearing its rings like a promise. Kalen exhaled. It's strange. The more time I spend in space, the more I miss gravity. And public restrooms that don't require a user manual. I miss silence, she said. True silence, not the hum of propulsion or the murmur of recycled air. Real stillness. Xyerlian temples have chambers carved into the skin of dead moons. You go there when the noise of thought becomes too loud. Kalen nodded, pretending to understand. I usually just take a nap under a weighted blanket. She laughed. It was soft, but it happened. A maintenance drone drifted by and emitted a questioning beep. Kalen saluted it. It spun once in apparent confusion before continuing on. I think it liked me. You do have that effect on machines. Your earpiece yesterday tried to translate my name into shrieking emerald skyfish. In my defense, I updated the software myself. I can tell. Another silence, this one different, not awkward, just present. Velara spoke again, quieter now. My people, they do not approve of emotional openness. Our diplomats are trained in detachment. Personal bonds are risks. Yet in the last summit, a Xyerlian envoy proposed to a water-based entity from Celari Roman 4. Kalen blinked. That must have been slippery. It caused an interstellar incident. Their respective fluids were incompatible. I feel like that's a universal metaphor. She turned to him then, more fully, and her eyes searched his like someone solving a puzzle written in a language she didn't yet know but was curious about. I am not used to this. Talking to a bumbling human with a talent for insulting fruit and falling into coat racks. No, being amused. A low chime interrupted them. An announcement in multiple languages filled the corridor. All envoys please report to Summit Hall Beta. Conflict mediation session commencing in 40 minutes. Refreshments provided. Warning, not all refreshments are edible. Read labels carefully. Kalen sighed. Duty calls. Walk with me. He did. They returned to the main corridors, now pulsing with foot traffic, fins, tentacles, and a very polite scuttling being that carried its translator in a tiny top hat. Kalen saluted it too. They reached the edge of the summit hall where Velara paused. Her aide approached but stopped at a distance, respecting the space between them. You said something honest yesterday, she said. I was under the influence of fermented betrayal. Still, it was rare, it matters. He nodded. You smiled. I did. Any chance I'll earn another? Uncertain. I'll take that as a solid maybe. She tilted her head again, and there it was, a small, almost invisible smile. Gone as fast as it arrived. And then she walked into the summit hall, regal, untouchable, followed by aides, advisors, and admirers. Kalen stood alone for a moment, then turned to find the buffet. He was halfway to the snack station when his earpiece crackled. Message from Ambassador Velara, tell Gerald I'm curious. Kalen grinned. He'll be thrilled. Behind him, the lights flickered just once, possibly a glitch, possibly not. The summit's third day began with a diplomatic breakfast and a low-level panic. Apparently, the protein-based food synthesizer had confused Zarthaki nutrient paste with decorative wall resin. Several guests had already attempted to eat the paneling before the AI could issue a warning. Kalen, holding what he hoped was actual toast, sidestepped a group of delegates debating whether chewing on the walls was a metaphorical insult or just poor taste. His badge now chirped every time he passed a security checkpoint, not out of suspicion, but in what the AI insisted was a friendly tone. A recent patch had given it the voice of a soft-spoken librarian, which only made it weirder when it greeted him with, "Good morning, potential sociopolitical anomaly." Velara was nowhere to be seen, which Kalen tried very hard not to read into. He ate his toast, which had the consistency of regret and the flavor profile of someone who had never met salt. Across the room, Gerald the egg creature waved at him by vibrating slightly and emitting a puff of spores that spelled out "Hi" in pink mist. Kalen waved back and promised himself again to never try the slime fruit brandy. "Human liaison," a voice said from behind. It was deep, dry, and carried the sort of gravity usually reserved for sentencing hearings. Kalen turned slowly. Ambassador Quarn of the Kraven hegemony stood before him, flanked by two aides with skin like molten bronze and eyes that never blinked. Quarn's ceremonial collar extended outward like a spinning dish. It occasionally clicked, possibly for dramatic effect. "Yes?" Kalen asked, with the tone of someone fully prepared to sprint. "You were observed conversing with the Zyerlian envoy, privately, repeatedly." "Well, I mean, once or twice, plus one accidental corridor rotation." Quarn's eyes narrowed. She smiled. Kalen tried not to look proud. It was subtle. "There are protocols," Quarn said. "Unwritten, but respected. Zyerlians do not form unsanctioned attachments during summits. Emotional interference may destabilize proceedings." "I think you're giving my conversational skills way too much credit. You are not amusing. Not to you, maybe. Gerald thinks I'm hilarious." Quarn leaned closer. "If you compromise this summit, I will personally request that you be reassigned to the Galactic Pest Mediation Council." "Sounds itchy." "Precisely." Quarn turned with imperial finality and strode off, his aides pivoting with synchronous menace. Kalen exhaled slowly and looked at his toast. It had started to weep softly. He abandoned it with dignity. The rest of the morning passed in a series of panels. Intergalactic zoning debates, tax reformation among sentient mineral colonies, and a very heated session on whether timeshare agreements on bioluminescent moons violated spiritual sovereignty. Kalen tried to focus, but his thoughts kept drifting. Long ears, soft laughter, and a smile he wasn't supposed to remember in such high detail. When the summit broke for mid-cycle recalibration, he found himself in one of the observation lounges, pretending to study a holographic map of emerging trade routes. Behind him, the door whispered open. "You're being watched," Velara said. Kalen didn't turn. "I figured. I nearly got reassigned to pest mediation." "Quarn, is he always that charming, or was I just lucky?" "He considers smiling a prelude to war." "Explains the hat." She moved to stand beside him. The starfield beyond pulsed slowly as the cruiser shifted its alignment. Far below, a gas giant flickered in iridescent blue. "I'm not very good at diplomacy," he admitted. "I know. I might be accidentally destabilizing galactic relations." "Yes, but I'm also not really trying to. I just like talking to you." Velara was quiet for a moment. "I spoke with my delegation. There are concerns that I am distracted." "Are you?" "Yes. Well, for what it's worth, I'm a very non-threatening distraction." "That is debatable." Kalen grinned. "I try." She looked at him then, searching again for something she hadn't yet named. "There's a ceremony tonight, The Unity Accord celebration. Will you attend? Is that the one with the synchronized levitation chamber and mandatory interspecies handshake circle? Yes. I've been practicing my grip for the tentacled guests. I call it the 8-limb shuffle. I'm sure it's terrible. It is. See you there. A beat passed, then yes. That evening, the celebration hall shimmered with kinetic lights. Guests hovered midair in slow rotations while orchestral sound waves danced along the walls. Velara arrived with her usual composure, robes flowing like coded poetry. Kaelin, informal where that didn't quite fit and glowed faintly when startled, approached with confidence born entirely from ignorance. The ceremony began. There were speeches in 13 languages, a quantum flute performance that reversed entropy in a small corner of the room, and a dessert course that sang. Midway through, the levitation began. Guests floated gently upward as the chamber's gravity field recalibrated. Kaelin, who had not read the safety manual, attempted a pose and began drifting sideways into a buffet tower. Velara caught his arm mid-spin. Control your center. My center is deeply confused. Together they floated, her steady, him flailing less as time passed. Above them, the ceiling opened to a transparent dome revealing open stars. Beneath them, the summit rotated like a dream constructed by very patient architects. He looked at her. So, just for the record, if someone were to fall for a Zyerlian diplomat, how badly would that mess things up? She looked upward. Hypothetically, of course, it would cause political discomfort, personal upheaval, possible exile, cultural rewriting. But aside from that, she turned toward him, and this time the smile came slowly, deliberately. Aside from that, it might be the start of something no one planned for. Kaelin blinked. You sure that's not just the gravity talking? Only partially. A tremor passed through the hull, the lights dimmed, a voice echoed overhead. Unscheduled power fluctuation detected. Gravity field resetting. Please adopt a neutral pose. Kaelin flailed immediately. Velara laughed again, caught his sleeve, and guided them gently back toward the center. Around them, delegates spun, muttered, collided, apologized, and tried to maintain dignity while hovering in midair. Kaelin grinned. So when do we start the cultural rewriting? Soon, she said. But first I think you owe me a story about Gerald. Oh, you're not ready for that one. There's a musical number. I look forward to it. And somewhere, unnoticed by most, the drone overhead logged their altitude, heart rates, and conversational tone, and flagged the moment as historically significant. The next morning began with an announcement from the Celestial Concord's AI that sounded vaguely concerned. Alert! A Zyerlian royal escort fleet has entered proximity range. Their transponder codes indicate diplomatic authority. Their formation suggests they are not here for the hors d'oeuvres. Kaelin blinked awake in his quarters, which were modest, slightly tilted due to a grav-level misalignment, and currently featuring Gerald curled beside his leg like a radioactive pillow. The creature emitted a faint humming that indicated contentment or mild static interference. Kaelin patted him cautiously and checked his terminal. 12 missed alerts. 5 marked important. 1 marked definitely attend this or face reassignment to garbage orbit patrol. He dressed in the diplomatic equivalent of formal pajamas and headed toward the summit hall, trying not to think about the Zyerlian fleet now hovering politely but ominously outside the ship. When he entered, everyone was already seated. Velara stood at the center of the hall. She was not alone. The Zyerlian delegation flanked her, resplendent in robes that shimmered like deep space radiation warnings. At the front stood a tall figure with robes wider than most conference rooms and eyebrows sharp enough to slice treaties in half. This, whispered a nearby delegate, is High Chancellor Vaiksar. He once made a moon surrender by frowning. The Chancellor spoke. We are here to clarify matters of diplomacy. Rumors suggest our envoy has formed unsanctioned rapport with a Terran representative. Kaelin, who was mid-sip of ceremonial broth, choked slightly and whispered, They say rapport like it's a contagious disease. Velara stepped forward. The rumors are true. There was a collective inhalation that sounded suspiciously like 40 different species, all gasping in their own language. I have chosen, she continued, to engage with Terran liaison Kalen Drev in a personal capacity, without committee oversight, without a vetting council, without biometric compatibility screening. Kalen felt about 84 eyes shift toward him. I'd just like to say, he offered, standing slightly taller, this wasn't part of any long-term strategy. I'm mostly just winging it. The Chancellor's eyebrow rose a full centimeter. You admit emotional compromise. I admit I'm as surprised as you are. There was silence, filled only by the ambient hum of political recalculation. The Chancellor turned to Velara. You know the consequences. I do, and yet you persist. I do. I will now frown disapprovingly. Thanks, I'll read those before bedtime. The delegation turned in unison and exited, their robes moving like a coordinated school of very judgmental manta rays. When they were gone, the room buzzed with a different kind of energy. Delegates murmured. A Martian representative nodded respectfully at Kalen and gave him a thumbs up with a prehensile antenna. Velara approached him, hands clasped behind her back. Well handled. I feel like I survived an intergalactic parent-teacher conference. You did better than expected. I only choked once. That's a 75% improvement. They walked together down the corridor, flanked by confused stares and the occasional burst of speculative gossip. The AI helpfully provided soundproofing as they reached the lift. Inside, Kalen exhaled. So, what now? I get an official warning, a souvenir mug. You get options. That sounds dangerous. She nodded, it is. They emerged into the diplomatic garden deck, where biospheres housed flora from over 80 systems. Gerald waddled into view, trailing a string of sparkles and a leaf stuck to his back. He chirped. Velara sat on a stone bench and gestured for Kalen to join. My people believe attachments dilute clarity. That affection introduces chaos. That vulnerability is a vector for collapse. And yet you made me laugh. That is rare. You're easy to talk to. I'm not, you simply don't know better. I'll take it. She looked at him seriously. There is still danger. Certain factions will not accept this. They will call it weakness, a liability. Then I guess I'm a liability. I've been called worse. You're not afraid. Terrified but also stubborn. That may be enough. A soft tone chimed. A drone hovered nearby and projected a message. Upcoming agenda, cross-cultural performance showcase. Attendance optional but strongly encouraged. Interpretive dance may occur. Kalen groaned. I once got hypnotized by a Glarnian rhythm chant. I woke up 3 days later with an honorary citizenship and 3 pet rocks. Velara stood. Then you'll need a guide. Is that an offer? It is. Then lead the way, Ambassador. They left the garden, walking side by side, an unorthodox alliance in a world of carefully balanced alliances. Behind them, Gerald sneezed and transformed briefly into a cube, then back into his usual lumpy self. The drone logged the interaction under developing situations. It tagged the moment with 3 flags: unanticipated variables, moderate risk, high interest. And deep in the ship's diplomatic archives, a new category quietly opened: cross-species emotional entanglements active. The emergency klaxon began as a polite chime, before escalating into a full panic honk that echoed down every corridor of the Celestial Concord. The AI's voice followed with its usual calm. Alert! Unauthorized approach detected. Vessel signatures match Zyerlian traditionalist directive. Shields raised. Diplomacy protocols suspended. Please avoid panicking in a circular fashion. Kalen blinked up from his seat at the cultural showcase, where he had been watching a Terran mime perform a surprisingly moving reenactment of planetary formation, using only his elbows. The performance had just reached continental drift, when the lights turned red and the ceiling began to rumble. Beside him, Velara stood, already contacting her aides. Her voice was steady, precise, and completely unsurprised. "They moved faster than expected," she said. "You mean the faction that believes your smile will destroy civilization. They've upgraded that belief to dangerous, destabilizing charm offensive." Catchy. Delegates scrambled as defense drones repositioned. Outside, on the other side of the observation window, 5 crystalline Xyerlian dreadships approached in a formation that looked aggressively symmetrical. Gerald burbled and slid under a table. Kalen adjusted his uniform. "So, what's the plan?" Velara turned to him. "We're going to talk to them." That sounds like the kind of idea that gets people vaporized. Only if they talk incorrectly. Guess I'll let you handle the syllables. They moved quickly through the diplomatic corridors as the ship's internal systems shifted into high-alert configuration. Walls adjusted to defensive shielding. Doors hissed in polite urgency. A nearby snack dispenser exploded, releasing a dozen steamed puffs with tiny holographic flags of surrender. The docking bay had already been secured when they arrived. The dreadship's boarding craft touched down like a jewel from a hostile god. A ramp extended, and from it emerged 3 traditionalist envoys clad in ceremonial armor that looked like they had stolen it from a temple, and then dared the temple to complain. Velara stepped forward before anyone else could speak. "You are not authorized," she said. One of them raised a hand. "We act in the interest of purity. The bond you formed threatens our structure." Kalen leaned over. "They always talk in capital letters, or is that just the angry font?" Velara ignored him. "My choices are my own. The Assembly approved non-interference." "The Assembly is spineless," the envoy snapped. "Better that," Velara said, "than brittle." The envoy looked past her. "Is that the human?" "I am," Kalen said, "and I come in peace usually, sometimes snacks." "You've seduced our envoy." She laughed once. "Twice if you count the breakfast incident. This connection violates ancient tradition." Kalen stepped forward. "You know what else violates tradition? Space pants, but we adapted." One of the other envoys whispered something. The leader frowned. "What do you propose?" Kalen hesitated. "Dialogue, you talk, we talk. No lasers, possibly tea." "There are no terms." "There are always terms. You just haven't had a good negotiator yet." The leader narrowed his eyes. "You believe you're a negotiator?" "No," Kalen said. "I'm a mistake that wandered into history, but mistakes can be useful." A long pause followed, the kind usually reserved for judgment or bad karaoke. Finally, the envoy lowered his hand. "You will meet with the directives in her quorum. A hearing, no guarantees." "I've worked with worse odds," Kalen said. "Once convinced a Martian bureaucrat to approve a pet license for a singing fungus." Velara touched his arm. "I'll go with you." He smiled. "You sure you want to tie your political fate to a guy whose translation earpiece still sometimes mistakes the word hello for I surrender?" "Yes." "Then let's go get judged." The hearing chamber aboard the dreadship was cold, metallic, and circular. The kind of architecture that implied no escape and very poor acoustics for dramatic exits. The quorum of traditionalists sat in high-backed thrones shaped like scowls. The questioning began slowly. They asked Velara about her duty, her role, her decisions. They asked Kalen about his intentions, his cultural background, and why he kept Gerald in his room. "Emotional chaos," one elder said. "Attachment weakens resolve." "Then I've been weakening everything around me since birth," Kalen replied. "But you know what? That chaos led to laughter, to new conversations. You're afraid because something unplanned happened. But look around. Every great change in history started with an unplanned moment, or, in my case, an ill-timed compliment. You think love is diplomatic. No, I think it's disruptive. But maybe that's what diplomacy needs sometimes." Silence, a long one. Then the eldest of the quorum, eyes like fading stars, spoke. "We will not endorse this bond, but we will not forbid it." That's a very formal way of saying, fine, whatever. It is. They returned to the Celestial Concord with quiet fanfare. No formal announcement. No ceremony. Just nods, handshakes, and the AI declaring, "Congratulations." Galactic upheaval narrowly avoided. Back aboard, life resumed. Delegates returned to debates. Kalen received a plaque that read "Emotional Outlier, Diplomatic Risk Level, Moderate." He hung it above his desk. Velara continued her duties, but now, sometimes, Kalen joined